Okay. So, first of all, I wanted to thank you for posting again stuff. Who's Gemma? Really good. Now, what's your name? Alex? Kelly? Who's Miroslava? She's what? So, you asked for, sorry, I'm just not going to mention the names, about that we should be talking about the assignment 1. All right. So, what is it that we would like to know? Yeah.
You know, the assessment criteria and the sort of key components that we're supposed to cover. Just sort of like talk about it if you have discussions.
Have you looked at the assignments which are already online?
I looked at one of them. I think
I have to
one
look.
of them had an e-portfolio, like a Google site on it.
Yeah, well, that was like 2 weeks ago. Did you look at the assignments online?
I've looked at one.
You looked at the first one. What was the girl's name? Sorry, I'm really bad with Mel or something like that. I can't remember. Really bad with names, Christian names in English. I just don't know. I've been here for 30 years. Just goes to show you. So you need to look at all of them, because I spent a considerable amount of time to respond to students. Now, there's a little bit of a trick with assignments. I can't give you the answer, because then you don't engage in thinking, nothing to do with the mark. And I don't really want to spend, because as you say, I don't really want to spend all my lectures, because I'm trying not to hold it for 3 hours. So by the time it comes 12 o'clock, we're ready to just die. I just want to actually have it short, and I want the lecture to do the things that we can't do ourselves. Or we can, but it's really difficult. So, what is it that how can we use this lecture to spend 5 minutes on the assignment? So what's the question, for example?
Okay, so say we did the first part, we did our bit where we define literacy, and then you've got some other bits about literacy practices. So what do we
How can we define literacy? I mean, what is it that I write on the learn line regarding the definition of literacy, but brushing through it is actually not the way to go? I'll just write literacy. No, I know literacy is, I'll just pull winch page 197, done, next. What do I say in these classes? That's, if you stuff it up, you stuff up everything. That's why you cannot answer number 2, number 3, number 4 for 2 reasons. Because number 1, which is what's literacy, is critical to your assignment. The only thing that will matter is actually if you get it right. And that means actually understand what you write. Has that actually, it's just like with story. What is the structure of a story? You know, I've done the work on it and I have it on my computer, and I'm not sure if I will cover it today. The point is, if you say that the story is the beginning, middle, and end, and I'll say to you, well, can you write it now? Can you, if I said to a person from Mars that the story has a beginning, middle, and end, can they write it? Everything we could say, has a beginning, middle, and end. So what's the difference between the structure of a story than the structure of your life, or the structure of... It's not operative. Now, I have the same problem with my postgraduate students. They give me definitions with which they cannot work. So what's the point of doing a definition? To be able to work with it. When I look at this definition, I know exactly what that means into practice. I know exactly what to do. Now, the reason why I want you to start becoming this way, so that you enter into the literacy field with your eyes open. A little bit like having your, what they call, cultural authority. As opposed to coming to the school and say, well, I'll just wait what they tell me. You don't have to be like it happened in, say, maybe my life. You don't have to wait until you're 50 to actually have cultural authority. You can begin at 20, provided that you know what to look for. Okay, so once we have so what I would suggest first, we might actually leave this discussion for next week. Sounds terrible, but I would like you to look at the learn line. Check my comments. I have explained pretty much everything there. I will make room for one question now, just in case I didn't explain something that might come up now. So more precisely, what would you like to know? Like really precisely. Now this, your life depends on it. You realize I only have like 50 minutes or 1.5 hours in this lecture. If I go over and over the same thing, I'm going to be doing the same thing in class what I do on LearnLine.
Okay, so what do you mean by literacy practices?
Well, I don't know. You've got to have a look. It will depend. You see, what I mean by literacy, I don't mean anything by literacy practices. Okay, how can I put it to you? Once you have a definition, you will know. I have also explained that on LearnLine, definitely. And I have raised that issue last week, which is what I always try to start the lecture with, which is, what did we do last week? What do I mean by literacy practices, okay? So we might actually not answer it the way you would like me to do, just to tell you the answer for your assignment. But we might actually try to rehash what we did last week in 5 or 10 minutes, or maybe longer actually, so that we can make sense out of the world, or this assignment at least. Okay, so what have we done last week? What were we doing last week?
You showed us those programs about speech to text.
Okay, so when I showed you this, and that's what I want to actually look at today, that's pretty good. So when I was doing this, why do you think I was doing that? No, I didn't really show you innovative ways for engaging students. I showed you different ways which are part nowadays. Why people develop that stuff? What do you think? Why is someone bothering? Not only that they sell it, because there's a lot of very good stuff like that, text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and yes, there's a lot of good stuff that actually looks much better when you buy it. You can buy some for $80, for $135. How do I know the prices? Because Jesus, I was going to buy it and then I didn't, and now I couldn't. So anyway, and some of them are literally $700, $1,500. That's how much people pay. Is this when it's actually it's not that difficult thing to see, but if people produce something about reading and writing, then that's part of our literacy culture, isn't it? Isn't it? It's about reading and writing, right? It's literacy culture. Literacy culture is not just one thing, it's many things. So obviously, the things I showed you belong to what? To the things people do in the world in regard to literacy. People use text-to-speech and speech-to-text. They do. And what did I say last week in regard to your assignment about that? I asked, did you use them? Do you use speech-to-text? Right. So, do you know now that it is out there? And how does, yes, so what do you write in the assignment? In order to make it show your engagement in this unit, you say, I know it is there. I don't use them. In fact, I didn't even know until Anya showed. This is your portfolio. You can actually say, Anya showed it. I didn't know before. But now, I don't use it. You can see how literacy practices are now, we're actually sitting in these classes and exploring what people do. What is out there. And remember that Winch doesn't talk about it because Winch books is old, plus also he's only a human being. So I bring to you many texts here, not just Winch, right? So if my lecture was to reread Winch, we wouldn't need this time. There's in the definitions you find, whenever I write stuff on LearnLine, I talk about things like literacy culture, the world of literacy practices, literacy culture. These things are part of literacy culture. So our world is becoming increasingly dependent on text, on print culture. In many different ways, for many different reasons. Because if you record, why did we invent print? Why did we invent writing? To have a record. Can't move forward. I mean, my dog doesn't need a record. My dog would pay money not to have a record. Please don't remember that. Please don't take it against me. That was yesterday. Not relevant. You could love me today. Please be nice to me. I mean, there are some things he's done and I wouldn't talk to him for a day. I would make everybody ignore him. That was a record. He hated that record. Right? So in order to keep the record, so that then we would remember that you borrowed a grain of sack from me, of a sack of grain from me, and I could prove it to you. There is stuff in clay says you did. You could tell everyone else you didn't, but somehow we did this tablet together. And it says you did. We have a record. Right. So we live in the world which increasingly depends on the culture of print, of text. And there are different ways in which people engage in that. That's it. I'm not talking about it. It's all on Learn9. Okay. Now, I got myself a student's evaluation from last semester, summer semester. It was all good. One student mentioned that they wanted more of one only student, because somehow the student must have felt that they didn't get enough of what is in the literature, what is in the literature. Well, first of all, you can check on Google. Second of all, I do it in different ways, which is Ackerman, myself, and also YouTube recordings. And there's only this much I can do in this unit before you burst from overload. Nevertheless, I thought to myself, there will be people who want to have a look at things. So remember where we have on Learn9 this thing, lectures online? One of the topics I have put there on the journals in literacy, extra information beyond the requirements of this unit. So you could, there's 2 postings I made there. You could have a look. I made them digestible. So even if when you have a curiosity moment, when you don't have anything else to do in your life, when you have a life like I have, which is no life, you can click on that and have a look. Okay, what I wrote there. But you will see that one of the reasons why I don't make it a postgraduate subject is because there's a lot of stuff there, and all of this contradicts one another. So we can only use that much. I use the literature which is out there to make the points about modern 21st or 22nd century literacy teaching. I'm just not going to go into the debate how people do things, because it is really complicated. So there, what's next? Okay, before we actually rehash, what I wanted to do with you this morning is to go through these things. Or some of them we have covered. What's here? Okay, last week. And I want us to actually start thinking, if a principal, if Anya Lian, unfortunately, was the principal of my school, and she told me I have to use that stuff, how would I use just those 3-4 examples of technology with children, little children? How would I use it? And would I? And because it's only a few of us, if you could move closer, or I don't know, doesn't matter really. Because it's on 2, 4, 6 of us, what I would like us to do rather than divide into groups, see ourselves as a group. And we might sort of spend some time playing. Now, why would you say I would do it to you during the lecture? Because my life is like that. When you become a teacher, your life actually shouldn't be looking for a manual and doing what told, but playing. You see, when you play, you go like, oh, that's cool, right? When you engage your imagination, you remain fresh. So you have a task to do. How would you start going about it? Intuition? What did you want? What did you want to say before I gag you?
Or just like how you could fit it into the curriculum in a meaningful way.
I will tell you one thing. When you engage your imagination, we will look at the curriculum. I've got it for this lecture, but I'm not sure whether we have time for everything. Curriculum has so many outcomes that you would have to be out of Mars to come up with something that the curriculum doesn't cover. But it's a good thing. So you do use the curriculum was written not even for you to make children do all that, but I see curriculum a little bit differently than most people. I see it as a handbook where when you come to the school and when you're first time, second time, just first year, second year, you kind of lose what in French is called pedals, like you kind of like that and this policy and the principal breathing on my neck, and then I've got observers in my classroom. The curriculum reminds you how big the world of literacy is, how many things actually happen in texts. I will also prove it to you, and I've done it if you watch the collaborative sessions from summer semester, that matching words with sounds or whatever, or letters with sounds, it's one among 30 or 40 outcomes or 50 outcomes, right? One. And everybody just does that. And what happened to the rest? A good question. Anyway, yes, that's good. Curriculum is very important. And if you were to start with a curriculum, what would you start with in the curriculum with? I mean, a curriculum is a huge document. What would you start with? Where would you look? But particular year, what you're teaching, so it's kind of similar. That's good.
Those are some of those outcomes.
Again, same thing, which is outcomes. Gemma, you write really well on the learn line. You've got you want to write the assignment one, you take and you have a permission. You take all her text and you paste it, and then you basically rearrange it according to your life, right? I said it to you. What students very often do, and I hope you will not do it, they write something on Learn, and I say it's fantastic for assignment one. And then they say, oh, I wrote it on Learn, and then in an assignment, there's none of that. And I go like, what happened to that stuff? Oh, I thought it was just for the Learn line. It's there. That's why we're writing all these texts. Copy, paste, rearrange according to your requirements. Copy, paste, rearrange. So she's done it for you. Look at that. Good work. I check how many words. Almost 600 words. Yeah. You add my comments to it, makes it 1,000. Pretty good.
I got caught up thinking about the context that I'll be coming from, because you said we're doing this thing for little kids, and I'm coming from middle school context. So you've been talking, and I've been going, well, trying to reflect on my experience of working with little kids, like kind of not up with you guys. I'm not up with the curriculum right now because I was caught up with placing myself in that class.
That's why I wouldn't look first into the year. I wouldn't even look at literacy. Whether you do middle school, high school, primary, or 3-year-olds, where would you look into first? Subject? No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. No. There's one thing that nobody actually pays attention to, and yet Ken Robinson talks about it. Every YouTube recording I have posted there talks about it, which is, do you know that the curriculum has a thing which is called generic outcomes, like creativity, team building, well-being, self-awareness, resilience, critical thinking? What else? What is it that we know? Because there's no point of me showing you these things again, those online systems, and now force you to my game. There's no point, because you sit there and you squeeze the things out of your brain. It's called like squeezing blood out of a stone, right? It's something else that is more important here. When we work, so self-awareness. So this is, I hope that anyway, so when we work, we need to sort of know what our ground is. What is it that we know? What is it that we know? And you've done year 1 literacy. You've done some other units. From everything you have covered, what is it that they all share? We might be doing, each of us as lecturers, we might be doing it a little bit differently. But one thing we know. Okay, when I used to read Piaget in English, I hated Piaget. But when I watched the video Piaget on Piaget, I thought that's nothing. What I read about Piaget, Piaget says, none of that what they write about me. I never said that. It goes about translation, right? It's not about translation. You've got to actually understand the intellectual history of the person, where he comes from, and then you can actually work with the meaning. So what is it that we know? We see those little bits in front of us in the classroom. What do we know about them? You do know it. You just are scared to say it. Well, what do you... Hey? No, not about them in a sense like you are from a... I mean, not in the pedagogic sense that the textbooks sometimes say to know. I just discount it because that's like misreading Piaget. It's like Piaget observed something and then they turned it into a stage. And they fixed it. They froze it in point. And now we know what children are like at the age of 3. Well, yes, well, you need to be more flexible with those statements from Piaget. So what is it that we know? So they were different. Simple, wasn't it? It was not a difficult thing to think, was it? They all are different. We know that. No, we don't. Well, you look at your husband, he's not like you, and yet you married him. Maybe that's why you married him, right? But then you have your kids, they're all different, and so on. Everybody is different. So we know that they are all different. Doesn't matter where they come from and so on. All of this is just different, which is what I always stress. When you will be creating your assignment 2, I will want you to think, how can you create your activities so that they engage everyone on an equal basis? Well, if you have to learn something from me, that's the thing you will learn from me, how to do that. So that you don't act like a police person or like an army. So when you start writing your assignment 2 and you write, and I'll get them to do this, and I'll make them do this, and they will be then doing this, and I'll do that, and I'll get them do that. When you write things, I will get them do this, you know you're on the wrong track. Right? Any of these words, a lot of I will, and I'll get them, any of those phrases literally don't look good. And they probably will not be working well in classroom. Okay, so we know they're all different, and I do not talk about how students learn because reality is nobody knows. So all these little phrases that people come in textbooks, you need to know how students learn. Well, you know what? You go to a professor who is the top professor in neuroscience and he will say to you, oh, I haven't got the faintest clue. What we have is glimpses about something, and I will talk about glimpses. But what is it that we actually can agree on without actually, so it's open enough that we can agree on, and it doesn't straitjacket children. So I talk about knowledge. I don't talk about learning. I talk about knowledge. We know that children, everybody, we construct knowledge. And Piaget, in that video, Piaget on Piaget, part 1, he says, we construct by reconstructing all the time. I'm sure I've written a response to Miroslava on this one, and Miroslava wrote to you, to Gemma. So throughout the whole life, it just never ends. We construct knowledge by reconstructing it. Because if we don't construct by reconstructing, what happens? We run the loop. And loops are very, very powerful. That's why you come in and you can't open the door of a lecture room. because the loop you are running, and we will talk about it very shortly. The loop you are running says the door should be easy to open, and yet at Charles Darwin University we've got doors that are like the nuclear bunker. Like you could actually, you need I don't know, you need to be a power lifter or something to open this door. That's how the buildings are constructed. So the loop you are running, or the assumptions that may allow you to survive in a decent and civilized manner in your life, was you don't actually bang in the door, you don't push the door, right? You don't act violently, especially as a woman. So we construct by reconstructing. So what is it that we know? That to survive, children run loops. We all run loops. They are very powerful. They allow us to live. Without the loop, we would not act. So loops are basically, in particular situations, we activate connections. And when the situation is new, we activate many. Remember how meaning is a function of what it is not? We eliminate. So the process, before you actually create a reliable loop, you activate a lot of connections in your brain before they solidify into one particular specific loop, to the point that it's really hard to unlearn. Hence, I have an accent. I'm running loops myself, don't worry, I'm no different. Right? It's really hard to unlearn because those loops are so reliable that the brain will not let go of them. Because if it gets rid of one loop, then all kinds of loops are being now endangered. Very interesting. So what loops are our 5-year-olds or 4-year-olds or 12-year-olds? What loops are they running? So you can translate it to middle school as well, because it's the same principle. What loops are they running? Before you teach them reading, or in order to teach them reading, what loops are they running? Have you ever seen 5-year-olds? Have they ever run rings? No, have they ever run rings around you? Have they joked with you? Have they made fun of you? Have they said, I had a 4-year-old in Germany, because I speak several languages, and in Germany, a 4-year-old, a lot of adults thought that I come from a different dialect, but he came up to me and he said, why do you speak German so, why do you speak so funny? Warum sprichst du so komisch? What was he doing? He was able to, he had a pretty strong phonetic understanding of his, or phonological actually understanding of his language. I point to here because they are so strong. They actually are somatic. They're inside of us after a while. So a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old has strong communication skills. They can tell a joke. They can tell a story. They can talk. What they can't do? What are we here for? They can't read. So we have to get them from one loop to another loop. Reading matters. Okay. So that's very interesting. We need to break them, or allow them to break out of habits that their brain recognize as perfect, working. That's why for some children, it's a big task. Now, in order to, this is the second point I wanted to make. It's very important. So if you want to write 1 and 2, this is the second point. So we need to break them out of the loop. In order for the brain to enable the break, the brain has to see a good reason. Now, you can act as a policeman and give them a reason. It's either a slap in the wrist or you do it. That doesn't support the policies of the curriculum and of the school, which go about children resilience, well-being, self-awareness, growing strong inside of yourself, that ain't just working with it. So slapping children and managing them as if they were in the army is not going to work. Not only that, I mean, it's not going to work because of policies, but actually considering that learning is all about emotions, even neuro-linguistically, it just won't work. Some things they will be exhibiting and you may be happy to see, but it's not actually what should be. What they will be doing is doing monkey behaviors, repeating to you, reproducing, but the learning is actually more expansive, so it's not going to happen. So we need to enable them to break out of the loop, and we need to actually give them a good reason. And there's one thing before we go into and play with those softwares. I wanted to make, which is a point 3. That the world is not actually the way we say it. Now, that is true. That's an axiom. But what I mean by that is, and that's hence you all see these bananas on the screen, because you wonder why the heck she put bananas on the bloody stones, and we're watching this, and what are we going to do with these bananas? Well, I didn't. It's a top professor in psychology, in neuroscience, who was giving the lecture, and I just happened to catch it this morning. I was going to watch it last night, but I wrote my own paper till 1 o'clock in the morning, so I just watched it this morning. Hence, I was a little bit on the, not late, but not as early as I would have liked to be today here. So what happens? So we have the loop, how to break, give a good motivation. And another thing is teachers very often say, because they look at the outcomes but have no understanding of the principle I'm talking about, which is construction through reconstruction, they are driven by the outcomes to the point that they act like soldiers in classroom. So rather than this lecture, rather than the class activities to be expansive and enabling differences to be engaged, what they do is, we've done the story, right? We've read the story. Now you can write just the story yourselves. There was no actually breaking between. If you do a reading with children, you haven't taught them how stories are constructed. You might have even spoken about this story, but you didn't actually teach them how story is constructed. So the jump teachers usually make, and I see it in the work my students present to me, is, well, we did the story about the lion and the mouse. Now they can actually write their own story. No, they're two different things. You still have to teach it. They might be able to do something, but not that. And if you assure them they can do that, what happens? You're creating a loop. And the loop is, I got away with this kind of structure, with this kind of story. And then they go to middle school and they still can't write. Why is that? Because we taught them, we created a loop. That will do. And she gets them and she goes, that's not a story. And how does that child feels? Pardon me, I used to get high distinctions or A's or whatever it is in schools. The parents come upset. Well, I'm sorry, this is not a story. So then you have to undo all these loops. And if you don't do it well, they go to high school, and what happens? Same thing. They come to university, and what most lecturers say about students' work? Students can't write. You wouldn't believe it. They can't write. They can't organize information. Right? Why do we have the bananas? Let's have fun a little bit. I will not play the game with you as this woman played, but I'll tell you the story. So, okay, so she's giving this lecture. It's like, like you have those Nobel Prize lectures sometimes, so it's kind of that kind of character. She makes 10 people in this big venue. She gives them this thing. Everybody is watching at this picture of bananas on the pebbles, and she makes them rewrite it, redraw it. They watch it for 15 seconds. I mean, big deal. What do you see? Do you want to play as well? Do you want to draw it? You can see it now and you can draw it. Okay? Take literally 5 seconds to draw it. You've got. Come on, don't worry. It's not going to prove anything. And I don't want to say it. I'll just draw it for yourselves, okay? Because I don't really want to say it. So it's not even 15 seconds. You draw it for yourselves, right? Why am I taking you through this? Because we're going back to Piaget, and the reason why in your modules you have a picture of a 3-year-old or 4-year-old girl drawing a triangle. So in your modules, you have this video, and I took a picture out of the video. The girl is seeing the triangle, and the teacher says, could you please copy that triangle? Have you seen what she has done? Well, what she has done, she drew this, and a bit of that, and a bit, I can't remember, something like that. We've spoken about it, I think, in lecture 1, and I clearly remember myself when I was little. Mind you, it could be a made-up memory, but I almost have a sensation that I used to do that. And I couldn't really understand why I felt compelled to do that. And somehow I felt that maybe I just didn't know how to do it. Now, if you put a pyramid-like shape in the middle of the room, so it's a triangle, will a 3-year-old walk around it, or will they not see it? They will see it. So how come they draw it in this way? Okay, you've got your bananas drawn. All the people that drew the bananas, so this is a piece of paper. They drew the bananas and all of that stuff around. What her argument is, that even if they are 40, 50, 60, 70, the memory is not about replicating, it's never about the past. It's always about future. So the brain apparently, when copying a picture, will do a particular trick. It will, what's called, extend the boundary. Look at that 3 or 4-year-old girl. The triangle is here. Her brain extended the boundary. And a lot of times, that's how people draw it. There was still, nobody drew the bananas as big as this and nothing actually in the background. Hardly anyone drew it in a very as detailed way. And what she's saying, people who have amnesia, people who have problems with memory, they only see what is. The brain is not projecting forward. So it's not using the past to move forward. It's just looking and redrawing. They don't use their resources because they don't have access to them anymore. The point is that the little girl in Piaget's experiment didn't draw a triangle. She drew this. And the teachers are likely to say, that's not quite like what we expected, Ali. Ali, could you just take a pen? Maybe we take, remember how in your curriculum often it's written imitate, model. So students then are compelled to take the child's hand and get it right. And I would suggest that in the light of what this woman from neuroscience is saying, you might be now actually interfering with what Piaget really meant, which is this reconstruction time where you actually, maybe what Ken Robinson is saying, you're removing the capacity to extend the boundary and therefore be creative. And now you make them into a little monkey. This is how it is. This is how you do that.
So what do you do then in that situation?
Interesting. That's why we're going to look at the technology. We're going to have a look whether we can extend our boundary and see whether we can actually see beyond what is. That's what creativity. is. See beyond what is. So you'll see a software which says, when you say something, something is visible. Well, so what? He would say, well, can you extend the boundary? And what Ken Robinson is, no, you can't. By the time you hit 25, you're not likely. Because the school already did for you. So two processes were happening. The one, which is a natural process of socialization, where you will be actually creating increasing amount of loops. But the other one is also when people violate the process of reconstruction in an expansive way, what happens is you no longer extend the boundary. All you see is the bananas, as you should. So if she did, for example, if it was in a school situation and everybody drew the way you drew and the way people in a symposium drew, and she would say that's wrong. You have to see it differently. You then train the brain to do what's actually against it. It's a survival mechanism, she says, to actually not draw it exactly as it is. This is very funny. I mean, I listened to it, I couldn't believe it. I'll put the reference to that lecture online next to those bananas, just for anyone who wants to see up-to-date research, right? But it's very interesting.
So does that mean with like anything that you're doing in the classroom, if you're correcting a student or saying that what they did is not exactly how you wanted it to be?
Exactly my point.
It's always going to be.
It might exactly be the case like you're saying. You might be shortcutting something, but you shouldn't be. Hence, what I'm saying is, what we shouldn't be doing is not teaching them to imitate or to do what we see as correct. What we need them to do is to follow their own goals. And that's very interesting. Hold it. It's an academic statement, what I meant by this. And I'll just explain it to you. I went to this lecture yesterday. We have these lectures on campus. Every Wednesday, we have these open lectures. And when I got in there, mind you, I'm really running hot, and you're getting it, because I'm writing my papers. I have this semester to produce like 300 papers. So I'm just about to finish one, and I already have other ones pretty much finished. I just have to. So you can hear it from my agitation. I am really running fast in my head. So you're getting that too, a little bit of it. So what happens now is you cannot forget that students construct by reconstructing. So what should the teacher do? Not teach them the way you see it, but put in place conditions that allow them to reconstruct, because that's what knowledge construction is. It's about reconstruction. See the difference? Not making children do as you please. Enable them to reconstruct. Enable them to see the reason why they have to get out of one loop and create another loop. That's two different things. One is monkey training, and the other one is treating people as social agent, as social beings. So in that lecture, we had this little bit of a discussion before the presentation. And because I'm really running hot I just went there after I just put a period on some sentence in my paper. I went to this lecture. My mind is still going 100 kilometers per hour. And I'm also thinking of you, because I'm at the same time as I do that, I do your lectures. Because it takes me a week to prepare. So why? Because it's always new. It's always new stuff. I said something in a little chat that we had between people who were sitting in the auditorium. And this guy says to me, sure, because learning is social. And I said to him, that's exactly the problem. Everybody learning is social, but what is not social? Therefore, why say learning is social when everything is social? So why say that? Why can't we just say something else that is more meaningful, just like literacy? Definition of literacy, it's not about reading and writing. Say something that will give you a direction what to do in classroom. Because if you say what everyone is saying, and it's not an operative definition, doesn't actually tell you how to work, what to actually do. So if you write in your assignment 1, literacy is about reading and writing, and maybe sometimes also working with visual materials, you don't know how to answer point 2. Because you go like, what do you mean by literacy practices? Well, if it's not in your definition, it ain't going to happen on page 2 of your assignment. It's just like when you say, learning is social, there. So what will you do with your children? Well, I don't know, because the statement is empty. Makes no sense to say learning is social everything, but if you understand that learning is construction through reconstruction, and reconstruction is done always in relation to others in a social context, well, that's a powerful thing, because now we have married reconstruction with done in relation to what happens in the world or around children. So they don't just reconstruct, they reconstruct in order to act smart, in order to have powerful loops, in order to do well. And those decisions are made in the context of interacting. They hardly ever again will have in real life a teacher who takes their hand and will show to them, no, darling, this is not a triangle, this is a square with a roof over its head. In real life, you get the job because you can think out of, you can find your way, you can break the loop, you can think differently. That's where the jobs nowadays are. The jobs are no longer in cutting the forest, they're no longer in digging out the coal, they're no longer in producing car parts. They're in technology, they're in thinking, they're in restructuring the way we live. So what did we learn? Just to summarize this big thing. What we learned is that children reconstruct, but not as they please, as they assess to be of value to their life, to their interactions with the world. As they assess, your feedback is useful, provided that it feeds back to what? It feeds to children reassessment of how they see things are, children reassessment of their goals, or your goals. What they call didactics, well, they call it in English, the word didactics means something else than it means in Europe, but in English, didactics means your goals. Pedagogic game means your goals. You are the it. And that you basically, did you play that game? You have a skipping rope and the person has to jump as you are actually rotating it. Well, that's what classroom typically is about. You do the beat. And when they fall out of it, the children with difficulties. It's never you. And it could be actually children who have extraordinary memories, who can actually still see the square instead of a triangle, even though they don't walk into objects. It's just that we didn't talk to them. In a sense, like our teaching is not talking to them. Interesting. And I'm just going to do the same thing with you now, because we still have a few minutes left. I am just going to close this particular recording and start the part